my friend, and if you haven't met Stace, all of your friends. He is your friend. I met Stace 3 years ago when he was first elected to the legislature. I've been down there for 1 year. And Stace just is a man of conviction. And it's hard to encapsulate that in speech or in an interview. But this man believes in our government, he believes in our Constitution, and he believes in everyone else, in our freedoms, our liberties. And that's what is so waning these days with the National Security Agency doing what they're doing. The federal government, $17 million or $17 trillion worth of debt. And we have a stark contrast in this Senate contest. Because we have a governor who, when Stace showed up in Pierre, had given us a $127 million deficit. They claim that he didn't, but that's exactly what happened, and the legislature went along with it. We need someone to go to Washington to fix our fiscal not somebody to exacerbate. And we need somebody who doesn't believe that they should be using the federal government's resources to maybe go to their kids' games around the state of South Dakota in airplanes and do things at this point. We need somebody who's inherently honest, and Stace is our man. I'm going to cut it short, but Stace has gone through an awful lot here. He stood for his convictions, and because of that, he became a target. And we need people that have the resolve that he had down in Pierre to stand by his principles, even after he had been essentially threatened and they tried to run him out. And he's a man of conviction, and I hope that you give him a warm welcome and help him in this endeavor to make sure that we have someone in Washington who actually believes what they say. Yep.
Good.
If anybody has any doubts what I'm drinking, I'll clarify. It's tea. What's in it? It's tea. It is. Folks, I want to thank everyone for coming today. But before we start our celebration of democracy, I'd like to just take 1 second. Kind of in a hallowed hall here, I would like to take a second to recognize my fellow veterans. If you have served in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, or the U.S. Coast Guard, I'd ask you at this time, please stand and be recognized. I'm honored to be amongst your company and in this hallowed hall. I will try not to let my emotions and my sentimentality affect me too much tonight, but anybody that knows me knows that I speak from the heart. I want to tell you up front, it's going to shock you, I don't want to run for the U.S. Senate. I spent 23 and a half years away from this place and the people I love. In faraway lands, putting my life at risk for this beautiful country, but more so than that, for these people, these South Dakotans that I love. Every day after I left this state, I dreamt of the day I could come back and would never have to leave again. Hundreds of South Dakotans over the last several years, maybe even to the thousands, have asked me to serve them and run for Congress. I apologize to those folks for taking so much time in answering that duty and that call. I do confess I was selfish. As I told you, I'm where I want to be in life. I'm blessed with my beautiful wife, Isa. Isa, wave your hand. I've got 6 beautiful children. 4 of them are in East River right now. I didn't want to have them take this whole journey out here. I've got grandson, Parker. My middle daughter Maggie is in the United States Navy, and she has my grandson Noah in Virginia Beach. My son Lee is in the Coast Guard Academy. So I tell you this so you know when you send me to D.C. and I have to make those decisions on the futures of your children who are in the military. Not only do I do so as someone who has walked 1,000,000 miles in their shoes, I do so as a daddy. The other reason why I don't want to run, an honest man is not going to be inclined to run to Congress, to D.C. Who in their right one mind wants to be associated with people that are ranked by the American public, I think they're just above ticks and fleas. So folks, I've looked at all that, and I realize by throwing my hat, not in the ring, but on top of the candidates that are there already, I'm taking on what's called a major political machine. Okay? That is not something easily done. How many folks in here, I'd like to take a quick poll, just for posterity's sake, how many folks are happy with the state of affairs in the United States right now? Not one of us. Now, that's a telling state. There's Republicans, there's independents, there's Democrats in here, there's libertarians, there's constitutionalists. Not one of us are happy. Now, when you talk to Americans, South Dakotans in general, and you ask them, where therein lies the problem? They will point to D.C. and say it's those professional politicians mortgaging our future that is the problem.
Send in the Marines!
Folks, you need someone who will go to D.C. and dissent from the culture of corruption that is D.C. You need someone who has proven that they will serve you, up to and including my life, if it was necessary. Now, some folks say, well, Nelson's playing the patriotic card. Folks, my logo's got the American flag and it's got South Dakota in it. American people said that I've earned the right to be buried underneath those colors as my funeral shroud when I die today. It is not just, it's not a campaign logo, it is who I am. It is ingrained in my heart, it's ingrained in my soul. I love this country. You don't spend 13.5 years in the Marine Corps and end up with the medical problems that I have if you don't. You don't then go on after the Marine Corps, after you're medically discharged, and work for you as another 10 years as a federal agent. It is because I love this country that I've answered the call of so many South Dakotans like yourself to run for the U.S. Senate. Now, we've got this culture in D.C. of a go-along to get-ahead politicians. They get to D.C., they'll tell you one thing when they're running for office, and then they get to D.C., and the things they're concerned about the most is, what office do they want to run for next? And who do they have to go along to get along, and who do they have to compromise to get into D.C. to do so, or to stay in D.C.? Now, all the candidates declared so far are saying they will go to D.C. and they will fight that corruption. They will dissent from that. They will not be part of that culture of going along to get ahead. Now, at the same time they tell you this, they point to their record here in South Dakota, in the legislature, and they point out that, well, look how great we've gone along to get ahead in South Dakota. One says he's been the majority leader, the other one worked his way up in the Senate, and then he was the governor. They got along real well with politicians in here. There's one person that has stood their ground with many beautiful people like my friend Liz May, Chip, Lance Russell, Gordon Howie. There's good people that stand the ground up there. But folks, I want to point out to you, this year we started with a $50 million surplus. $50 million surplus. Did you get your tax rebate check in the mail?
Yes, I did, thank you.
Well, you're the only one. Because they blew through that $50 million. They tacked on another $97 million. They tacked on 120 new FTE positions. They started new programs that you didn't know you needed to have, that you were getting by before July 1st, that you now have for as long as they keep keep them going. In the last 3 years, there's been 17 tax and fee raise bills that were passed in the legislature. One of my opponents voted for every last one of them. He was a sponsor on some of those. I opposed all of them except for 4. And there was a couple of fees in there to include the fee for a mixed martial arts and a boxing commission. I have actually fought taxes. I have fought spending here in the state of South Dakota. I am in this race because there is no other real conservative in this race. Now, folks, I'd like to point out that some of these folks have bragged that they're going to have $9 million to run here in the state of South Dakota. I'm offended by that, and I'll tell you why. They say that they will make D.C. stand on its ear and they will fight D.C. for you. D.C. is so scared of them that they brag that they're going to get at least $3 million from D.C. So evidently D.C. is not scared of them. They're waiting with open arms for these folks to go there and be more part of the go along to get ahead crowd. Now, I want you to think about this. In the 237 years our country has been in trouble, where have these other candidates been? This country has not been in trouble just this year. I take a look. I ask you, please, put me side by side with any of these folks. Look at my life history. Look at their life history. Ask yourself, which one screams public service and commitment to you, the American public? Now, in the last 237 years, this country has dissented from the evils of the world. Men that have been members here have fought against the Nazis in Germany. They dissented from that evil. We have men probably here that have fought in Korea and dissented from communism. We have Vietnam vets that dissented from the evils of communism. We have members of this place here and American citizens that have dissented from terrorism abroad. Now I ask you, for the last 237 years, when Congress, when those politicians wanted to send someone in to fix the problems of America and dissent from the evils of the world, did you hear the holler go up? Send in the politicians! No. Even the politicians know that when they want something done right for America, when they want evil, when they want corruption dissented from, they don't mess around. Congress even sends in the professional dissenters. The Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, and the U.S. Air Force. Let's say the best for last, Jim.
I noticed.
So, folks, I tell you this. In my 23 years of serving abroad, I served your interests without regard to your party affiliation. I did not care whether you were a Democrat or Republican, independent, libertarian, or constitutionalist. The last 3 years in office, I've done the same thing, with the expressed understanding to the public that I am a conservative, I'm a Christian conservative Republican. And I've told them what my values were, what my principles were, and how I would serve them with those values and those principles. And I have stuck by them. But I've done so respectfully and respectfully of my constituents who are not the same as myself, and respective of my fellow legislators who are from the Democratic Party. When they brought bills that I could support, you talk to Minority Leader Mr. Hunoff, and he will tell you that I fought just as hard for their bills as I fought for any one of my bills. We do not need partisanship in South Dakota or in D.C. We need people that are willing to go to D.C. and work across the aisle, and not just give it lip service or rabble-rouse here and claim that the problems in America are all the problems of the Democrats. Because I will argue all day long, it is not the Democrats to blame. This out-of-control spending occurred with the complicit assistance of Republicans that went to D.C. to go along together. Folks, the largest budgetary item for our national budget is our defense budget. Before today, there was not a candidate that had any credentials whatsoever to deal with the Department of Defense budget, or national security, or counterintelligence, or intelligence, or counterterrorism. I spent a long time serving you abroad. I have expert credentials in all those areas. I am the only candidate that is the most qualified to serve you in D.C. Not only because of those credentials, but because of the fact that it is written in blood my service to you and my dedication to you these last 26 years.
Thank you for your service.
Folks, some of these candidates have been declared for a year. If I had to ask you, put your life at risk, say, tell me where these people stand on every issue. Not one of us could say where these other candidates stand on the issues. Historically in America, going back, it has not always been where you have all these politicians that are running for office that do not tell you where they stand on the issues. Or they take an issue and they sit on both sides of the fence. I'm for amnesty, I'm against amnesty. I'm for Obamacare, I'm against Obamacare. And that's what we have with some of our candidates today. People that claim that they're for keeping limited government and for keeping your taxes lower, but are instrumental in having raised taxes, and instrumental in having raised spending, and instrumental in having created more government in the state of South Dakota. As Representative Russell mentioned, my first year in the legislature, we were confronted with a $127 million deficit. Now, one of the candidates that was directly responsible for creating, and I'll use Governor Dugard's words, creating that deficit over several years, I'll paraphrase, excuse me, is now saying there was never a deficit. I'm offended by that because it is dishonest. It is dishonest to South Dakotans. There was thousands of South Dakotans were impacted by the 10% cuts that we had to make to get our state budget back in line and be balanced. And that lays at the feet of two of the candidates that are running underneath the Republican banner. Now, we have to cut our deficit and our massive debt in the federal government. And the candidates that are out there so far have done exactly what they did in D.C. here in South Dakota. Matter of fact, Obamacare. One of these candidates accepted $5 million here in South Dakota to help set up Obamacare. Another candidate, two of the candidates, helped pass Senate Bill 3843, which enacted Obamacare here in South Dakota in January 2011. Now, when they find out that everybody's against that, now they're against Obamacare. Oh, and by the way, one of those gentlemen was on a national task force with former Democrat Tom Daschle to help enact Obamacare here throughout the United States.
Red Tom. Yeah. Red Tom.
But now when it's time to run for office, they're conservative, they're against Obamacare, and they're going to fight for you in D.C. Well, folks, I'm going to change the way politics are done as far as I can. In days gone by, when someone was running for public office, they had the integrity to look the voters in the eye and say, listen, this is who I am, this is what I plan on doing, and you have a right to know that, even if you disagree. So what I've come up with is a contract with South Dakota. As your fellow countrymen seeking to serve you in your United States Senate, I propose not just a change in policies, but even more importantly, to help restore the bonds of trust of we the people with those who are supposed to be our faithful public servants. That is why, in this area of political evasion, equivocation, and posturing, I submit to you now a detailed commitment to rein in our federal government with no fine print. Next year's election offers the chance, after decades of politicians expanding government, to bring to Congress an actual public servant that will work to reduce a government that is too big, that is too intrusive, and too easy with your money. A public servant that will insist that Congress respects the rights of the people, our values, and the faith of the American family. Like President Abraham Lincoln, I will serve you with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. I will set the example of how an honest public servant answers to, is loyal to, and serves to the public. I will help restore accountability to Congress and restore the standard of how the free people of this great nation should be able to live without fearing our government. This contract with you is aimed at restoring the faith and trust of you, the American people, with those who are supposed to serve you. Therefore, I, Stace Victor Nelson, pledge to the taxpayers of South Dakota and to the American people that I will support only legislation that is constitutionally sound and which equally applies to all Americans, to include Congress. I will oppose any and all efforts to increase the marginal income tax rates for individuals and or businesses, and oppose any net reduction or elimination of deductions and credits unless matched dollar for dollar by further reducing tax rates. We don't have a revenue problem in here or D.C. We have a spending problem.
Yes.
Now I'd ask you to listen to this next pledge that I'm making you. And I want you to consider what the other candidates have said about pledges. This pledge I've taken, it's out of the Republican South Dakota Republican Party platform. I've synopsized it, but you'll get the gist of it. I will support the reduction of the income tax, review and reduction of other federal taxes, limit or reduce government spending, and I will support the rest of the South Dakota Republican Party platform. Except when related to a congressional authorization of force, I will consider all spending open for reduction and vote only for budgets that present a path to balance, and vote against any appropriations bills that increase total spending and against the authorization or funding of new programs without offsetting cuts in other programs. I will support only nominations to the Supreme Court and U.S. federal benches, judges who are committed to restraint and applying the original meaning of the Constitution, not legislating from the bench. I will oppose any further stimulus, spending, or bailouts with your money. I will support the repeal of the federal death tax. I will oppose any amnesty for illegal aliens, actively work to require the securing of our borders, and support measures which prohibit employers from knowingly hiring illegal aliens. I will support the full repeal of Obamacare. Also known as the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. A side note, it hasn't been real affordable on the increases I've had on my fees, I can tell you that. And I will oppose any bill or budget resolution that provides funding to implement or enforce any part of it. I will support pro-life legislation to permanently end all taxpayer funding of abortion in all domestic and international spending programs. And defund Planned Parenthood and all other contractors and recipients of federal funds with affiliates that perform or fund abortion. I will oppose any efforts to seize or require registration of Americans' firearms. Or any other efforts to subvert or limit Americans' constitutional Second Amendment rights. And I will actively support national concealed carry permit reciprocity, as well as other legislation that ensures Americans' Second Amendment rights. I will support legislation of drug testing for anyone receiving public assistance. folks to pay particular attention to the last part. I will honor my oath. There's 3 of us in this race who have taken an oath to the South Dakota Constitution to support it and uphold it. I want to tell you this part here. I will honor my oath to support the Constitution of the state of South Dakota to include Article 3, Section 32, term limitations for United States congressmen. No person may be elected to more than 2 consecutive terms in the United States Senate or more than 6 consecutive terms in the United States House of Representatives. And I will support legislation to enact those term limits nationally to replace career politicians with citizen legislators. The last part of this. I will care for our veterans. And for their widows and their orphans. By working with the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Fleet Reserve Association, Marine Corps League, Disabled American Veterans, Paralyzed Veterans of America, Vietnam Veterans of America, Purple Heart Association, Military Order of the Purple Heart, and other service groups to identify and support legislation that removes employment barriers and ensures our nation is fulfilling our obligations to those of us who have borne the cost of our freedom. This I swear to you, my fellow South Dakotans and American people, and to my good Lord. I signed it this morning, and it's notarized, and it will be on my website. Folks, you hear a lot of arrogance and braggadocio by some of the candidates that they'll take on all comers. Well, I'll take on all comers.
All right.
More importantly, and I want to make sure I get in the camera back there, I challenge these candidates to debates in every city, every town in South Dakota. I challenge them to bring their record. I'll bring my record. I'll bring my lifetime of public service. And I'll bring my commitments to the people. Let's bring it to South Dakotans, because the South Dakotans I've met so far, they're tired of career, professional, pragmatic politicians that have mortgaged their future. And I've been told South Dakotans want an actual public servant. Folks, I come before you today as a humble son and grandson of the prairie. Both my grandfathers were farmers and had cattle and ranch. Both of them wore shirts oftentimes like this when they were working on the farm. It's not by happenstance I chose what I was wearing today. I intentionally chose a blue-collar shirt with my sleeves rolled up so that you know that I'm here to go to work for you. Folks, my first chores in life was throwing bales and scooping manure.
You're gonna have to do that more
We're gonna have to do some scooping.
Folks, the reason why I tell you that is when you want someone to serve you, when you want someone to work for you, you want someone who is humble, who wants to do the job, and who will serve you. And I ask you to look at my life's history. I ask you to examine me as an individual. Now, I will tell you, every week I confess to the good Lord that I am a poor, worthless, ignorant sinner. And I ask Him, I beg for forgiveness, and I attempt to lead a godly life. I will surely make mistakes along the way. I may misspeak. I may have a shoe that isn't tied, and I'm sure the opposition will be right there, and I welcome that. But one thing I want you to take away today is I have loved serving you these last 26 years. And my reason for running are you folks sitting right here.
We love Stace. We love Stace. We love Stace.
Folks, I will leave you with this humble statement. Most of us agree, all of us agree, that our country is in trouble. Send me. I will serve you, and I will fight to restore our government to be the honorable institution our founding fathers envisioned, and a government that you deserve. Thank you for coming out today.